Flashes of armed conflict over Rezangla, at Nathula, in Doklam, over Galwan and along the Bomdila. So many times have India and China exchanged fire. Soldiers on both sides have died heroes' deaths in unwanted combat. In recent years, China has built a network of bunkers, tunnels and fortified villages. India in turn has mobilized around 100,000 soldiers and moved them closer to the front line. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi visits Arunachal Pradesh, the hackles rise in Beijing. China says Modi is trespassing on Chinese land. As Chinese goods flood India like the rest of the world, nationalistic calls go out to shun these products. For 75 years, the giant neighbors have engaged in friendship and war, in peace and enmity, have traded threats and produce in equal measure, at times up and sometimes down. It is not surprising that the Hindi-Chini posturing of a yo-yo relationship stretches all the way from Delhi to Beijing and back. On July 19, 2025, the Chinese Premier Li Qiang led a ceremony that marked the groundbreaking of the Motuo hydropower station, a hydropower project that would be the largest in the world. A project being built at a cost of around $170 billion to generate 3 times the electricity of the world's current largest hydro installation, the Three Gorges project. It is being built at a stretch of the Yarlung-Tsangpo River in Tibet, where the river drops 6,500 feet within a short span of 50 kilometers. All of this is taking place before the river enters India in Arunachal Pradesh and becomes the Brahmaputra. The Chief Minister of Arunachal Pradesh, Pema Khandu, called it a water bomb in the hands of China.
चाइना का भरोसा नहीं है, कब क्या कर देगा। तो मान लीजिए अभी वहाँ पे डैम बन जाने के बाद में वो लोग अगर पानी को छोड़ देते हैं तो हमारा पूरा जो सियांग बेल्ट पूरा ख़त्म हो जाएगा। और वहाँ में खास करके जो ट्राइब है वहाँ पे आदि ट्राइब लोग मैक्सिमम उस बेल्ट में ही बसे हुए हैं। तो वहाँ का पूरा प्रॉपर्टी, उसका ज़मीन, खास करके ह्यूमन लाइफ बहुत काफ़ी डिवास्टेटिंग इफेक्ट होगा। ये काफ़ी एक, क्योंकि चाइना इसको लेके एक वाटर बॉम्ब की तरह भी वो लोग यूज़ कर सकते हैं।
3 days later, the Chinese Foreign Ministry released a statement saying the construction of the Yarlung-Tsangpo hydropower project is a matter within the scope of Chinese sovereign affairs. The year 2020 was to be a significant year in the Sino-Indian relationship. Both sides planned 70 celebrations to commemorate 70 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries. The outbreak of the pandemic disrupted all arrangements, and then on the night of June 15th, conflict broke out in Galwan Valley of Ladakh that brought India-China relations to the lowest point since the War of 1962.
齐发堡组织官兵一边喊话交涉，一边占据有利地形，与数倍于己的外军展开殊死搏斗。
On the last day of August 2025, President Xi of China will be hosting 20 world leaders in the port city of Tianjin for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO summit. Among the big names on the guest list, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first visit to China in more than 7 years, as the two neighbors work on further diffusing tensions that had peaked in the Galwan clashes of 2020.
I think Galwan was not a new thing. It was symptomatic of what was happening between the two countries, but it was a messaging. And I think we were able to retort in a suitable manner, clearly indicating to China that you cannot militarily dominate over India, even if you think that economically you are ahead of us.
The Republic of India and the People's Republic of China emerged as independent nations within 2 years of each other. India in 1947 and China in 1949. India was the first non-communist country to formally recognize PRC and establish diplomatic relations in 1950. What followed was a period of cordiality. The phrase Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai was formatted, culminating in the conclusion of the Panchsheel Pact between both countries in 1954. And then war broke out between the two in 1962. Chairman Mao of China described the 1962 war as a politico-military war. Later historians surmise that he had two goals behind the sudden Chinese aggression. One was to show both the then superpowers USA and USSR that India, which was seen as leaning towards them, was not a dependable Asian partner. His second goal was to coerce India back to a neutral posture advantageous to China. In both these goals, Mao failed.
India and China historically were not neighbors. China imposed itself as India's neighbor by annexing the historical buffer Tibet. In 1951, that historical buffer Tibet disappeared. China annexed it. And 11 years later, China invaded India. In fact, within 4 years of annexing Tibet, China began encroaching on Indian territories.
There is an old Chinese saying about how one mountain cannot accommodate two tigers. In that story, they decide to share the mountain peacefully, opting for cooperation over confrontation. It took about 4.5 years after the Galwan conflict for India and China to take some tentative steps at cooperation rather than confrontation. Dialogue, which had practically fizzled out, began again. A Vladimir Putin encouraged meeting of Modi and Xi on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, confirmed the beginning of the thaw. A border agreement saw troops stepping back from two flashpoints. The Foreign Minister of China, Wang Yi, landed in India on 18th of August 2025 on a 2-day official visit. The next day he met Prime Minister Modi and the decks were cleared for better cooperation between Delhi and Beijing.
I think it's a tactical adjustment to the new ground realities. China is under threat from the USA. India is under threat from the USA. The USA has announced today they will impose 200% duties on China. China knows that its trade is going to be impacted. India's is already impacted. So I think all that is happening really here is a reset. I don't think it's a reset really, but a tactical adjustment to Trump.
While the 2020 border clashes are often seen as a turning point in Sino-Indian relations, the reality is that the bilateral relationship had been in steady decline for some years before. One of the reasons for this decline had been because of more assertive foreign policies in both countries. This because of the rise of strongman nationalist leaders in both India and China that had happened around the same time. Xi Jinping was elected President of China in March 2013. And Narendra Modi became Prime Minister of India in 2014. An increasingly assertive Chinese foreign policy played out along the Sino-Indian border and in China's other territorial disputes in the East and South China Sea areas. India's growing closeness with the US was also a potential catalyst for deteriorating Sino-Indian relations. But despite this, the two leaders have been meeting regularly over the years. In September 2014, President Xi was an honored guest in India. Prime Minister Modi took him to all the interesting spots, and a closer developmental partnership was seen swinging on the cards. The very next year, in May 2015, Prime Minister Modi went to China and held meetings between sightseeing tours. In 2018, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi held their first informal summit in Wuhan. And in 2019, a second informal summit took place in Chennai in October. A sticking point in India-China relations has been China's near 3-decade-long nuclear and missile technology assistance to Pakistan. China has done this in violation of its international treaty obligations. Beijing has also carried on the supply of military hardware to not just Pakistan but Bangladesh and Sri Lanka as well, much to the annoyance of India. Over the years, funding civilian and military projects in neighboring countries, forming a ring around India, a string of pearls, particularly in the Indian Ocean region, has been business as usual for China.
China became the invisible third party during Operation Sindoor. China provided real-time intelligence, radar feeds, and satellite reconnaissance data to Pakistan. And then, more recently, just last month, China began building the world's largest dam ever conceived, right on the India border, with no transparency.
In the year 1984, India and China had entered into a trade agreement that gave each other the MFN, Most Favored Nation status. By the financial year 2024-25, China had become India's second largest trading partner. India is also relying on its increasing trade with China to achieve its target of becoming the world's third largest economy within the next 2 years. But China remains cautious about India's growing acceptance into US military circles. Of late, thanks to a series of foundational defense accords, the Indian and US militaries are cooperating at unprecedented levels. US arms sales and technology transfers to India has increased multifold. India being in the Quad is also not appreciated by China. While not naming India, Beijing criticizes Quad as an Asian NATO.
China doesn't want to settle the border issue. It wants to penetrate India's market. It wants greater access to the Indian market, especially now, given the fact that Trump is seeking to reshore manufacturing, bring manufacturing back to the US. And China is under pressure from the Trump administration. And for China now, the Indian market has become increasingly important.
In the constantly revolving world of geopolitics, enemies and friends can change position at random intervals. New alliances constantly form as old orders are reworked. Nothing is permanent, nothing cast in stone. It is being said that the erraticism of US President Donald Trump may yet see a new entente form. A new world order where India and China march shoulder to shoulder to carve out a new future for the peoples of their republics. But politics, like trade, is all about balancing numbers and coming up trumps at the end of the business cycle.